All right, so have you ever wondered, what's the real secret to becoming really good at something? You probably heard that whole 10,000-hour rule
Mhm.
thing.
Oh.
Right. So today, we're going to dive deep into whether that's the only path to success or if maybe, just maybe, there's another way.
And lucky for you, we're challenging that whole early specialization hype today
Yes.
with a healthy dose of David Epstein's work.
Okay.
He's the author of Range: Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got some seriously interesting things to say about all this.
Yeah, I've heard great things about that book.
Oh, yeah.
It's so easy to think, people like Tiger Woods,
Right.
hyper-focused on their field from such a young age and be like, yep, that's the ticket to success.
Right, the classic Tiger Woods model.
Yeah.
It's a compelling story.
It is.
But is it the whole picture?
Right.
Epstein's research suggests it's not. He points to a different path, one that actually emphasizes exploration and breadth, especially early on.
Interesting.
So let's start with this whole 10,000-hour rule.
Okay.
It's everywhere these days.
Right.
The basic idea is if you just practice anything, playing an instrument, coding, whatever, for a solid 10,000 hours, you're guaranteed to be a master.
Right. It kind of makes sense.
Right.
I mean, practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what we've always been told.
Sure, practice is definitely important. But Epstein points out that the 10,000-hour rule, as it's usually thrown around,
Yeah.
is a huge oversimplification of the original research.
Really?
Oh, yeah. First off, that study only looked at musicians.
Okay.
Not exactly representative of every skill in every field out there.
Right. It's like saying if you eat carrots, you can see in the dark.
Exactly.
Just because it might be true for some doesn't mean it applies across the board.
Exactly. Plus, Epstein points out that the study only focused on averages
Okay.
and completely ignored the huge amount of individual variation.
Right.
I mean, some people in that study might have hit their peak at 5,000 hours, others maybe 15,000.
Sure.
There's so many other factors involved. Natural talent, learning styles.
Yeah.
Heck, even how much sleep you're getting.
It's so true. Everyone's journey is different.
Yeah.
It's like, don't compare your beginning to someone else's middle.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Oh.
And to be clear, Epstein isn't saying those 10,000 hours are meaningless.
Okay.
Putting in the work will definitely make you better at what you're doing. But he argues that the rule is often misapplied, especially in fields that are more complex, constantly changing.
Yeah.
You know, the kind where the goalposts move a bit.
Okay, so if this Tiger Woods model of intense early specialization isn't the only path, what is? What does Epstein suggest?
Well, he proposes what he calls the Roger Federer model.
Okay.
Instead of focusing solely on one thing from a young age, he suggests embracing a sampling period.
Sampling period. That sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
It's about exploring a variety of activities, especially early on. He uses Federer as a prime example.
Right.
Instead of going all in on tennis as a kid, Federer actually dabbled in all sorts of sports. Soccer, skiing, swimming, you name it. He built a broad athletic base first.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like building that foundation of athleticism before honing in on a specific sport.
Precisely. And Epstein's research indicates that this kind of diverse experience, particularly in those formative years, can actually be a huge advantage over time.
So what you're saying is, I shouldn't have given up on those piano lessons when I was 8.
Well, it's never too late to try new things, but you're getting at the heart of it. Early specialization can sometimes be like jumping the gun. You might be optimizing for the short term, winning that junior tournament, acing that calculus test, but you might be sacrificing long-term development and adaptability in the process.
Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
So how does this sampling period actually play out in the real world? Outside of becoming a tennis legend, of course.
We'll take the work Epstein did with the Pat Tillman Foundation.
All right.
They provide scholarships to military veterans who are transitioning to civilian careers.
Oh, wow. So those are folks who've been through a lot, facing a whole new set of challenges.
Absolutely. And many of them feel behind their peers when it comes to traditional career paths. But here's the thing. Epstein argues that their diverse experiences, leadership in high-pressure situations, problem-solving on the fly adaptability in constantly changing environments, those are incredibly valuable assets, even if they don't fit neatly on a resume.
I can see that. It's not just about what you've trained for specifically. It's about the skills you've developed along the way.
That's right. And that's where this idea of the fade-out effect comes into play. Epstein talks about how in a lot of fields, those who specialize super early might seem like they have a head start.
Yeah.
But those with these broader foundations, they often catch up and even surpass the early specialists over time.
It's like the tortoise and the hare all over again. Slow and steady, winning the race.
Exactly.
Wow.
Because the real world, it's always changing. It's not enough to just be great at one thing. You need to be able to adapt, learn new things, and connect the dots between different fields.
This is all making a lot of sense.
Mm.
But how do we actually make sense of this sampling period idea?
Yeah.
Is it just about dabbling in random things, hoping something sticks?
Great question. It's not about randomness, it's about recognizing there are different types of learning environments. Epstein calls them kind and wicked learning environments.
Kind and wicked. Okay, let's unpack that. What's the difference?
Yeah.
Okay, kind versus wicked learning environments.
Okay.
I'm all ears.
So kind learning environments are kind of like learning to play chess.
Okay.
You have these clear rules, immediate feedback, and patterns that repeat.
Right.
Make a move, you see the results right away, checkmate or not.
Yeah.
This makes them easier to analyze and even automate, which is why computers are now chess masters.
Right. It's all about recognizing those patterns.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Most of life and most jobs aren't like chess at all. They're what Epstein calls wicked learning environments.
So a bit more unpredictable, I'm guessing.
That's putting it mildly. Wicked learning environments are complex.
Okay.
The rules change, feedback is delayed or even misleading, and your past experience doesn't always translate to future success.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Think managing a team, innovating in a business, or even something like fighting a forest fire.
Definitely not chess.
Right.
And in those scenarios, having a wider range of experience would be even more valuable, right?
Absolutely, because in wicked environments, it's not just about mastering a specific skill set.
Yeah.
It's about being able to adapt, think critically, and make judgment calls, even with incomplete or even contradictory information.
Right.
And sometimes over-relying on data in these environments can actually be dangerous.
Really?
Yeah, Epstein uses the Challenger disaster as a cautionary tale.
Now, that's a story that still sends chills down my spine.
Yeah.
What does the Challenger have to do with specialization?
Well, what's fascinating is that NASA, an organization built on scientific rigor, fell victim to a kind of over-specialization.
Mm-hmm.
They were so focused on the quantitative data
Yeah.
that they overlooked qualitative warning signs about those O-rings on the solid rocket boosters.
So they were so deep in the numbers that they missed crucial signals from elsewhere.
Exactly. The engineers who designed the boosters actually raised concerns about the risks of launching in cold temperatures. But their warnings were dismissed because they didn't have enough hard data to back them up.
Which is just tragic, because that decision ultimately led to the loss of 7 astronauts.
It is, and it highlights the dangers of what Epstein calls narrow specialization. When your focus narrows too much, you risk missing critical information that exists outside of your immediate area of expertise.
And in those wicked learning environments where the rules are constantly in flux and there are no easy answers, that kind of tunnel vision can be fatal.
Yes. And it's not just limited to something as complex as space exploration.
Right.
Epstein gives another chilling example of firefighters who lost their lives with their tools still in hand because they were so focused on their standard procedures that they couldn't adapt to a rapidly changing fire.
Wow. Their expertise became a liability in that moment because they couldn't adapt.
Precisely. It underscores this crucial point that Epstein makes throughout the book.
Yeah.
Procedures and checklists are essential.
Right.
But rigidly clinging to them when the situation demands flexibility can be disastrous.
Okay, so if specialization can be a trap, especially in these wicked environments, what's the solution? How do we cultivate the kind of flexibility and adaptability that's needed to thrive in a world that's constantly throwing curveballs?
Epstein emphasizes the power of what he calls analogical thinking.
Right.
He argues that the best problem solvers don't just fixate on the immediate details of a problem.
Yeah.
They draw on a wide range of experiences and analogies from different fields.
It's like cross-training for your brain.
Exactly. It's about making connections between seemingly unrelated fields and finding unexpected solutions that others might miss.
Wow.
Yeah, he illustrates this beautifully with the story of Gunpei Yokoi, the creator of the Game Boy.
Oh, wow. A blast from the past.
Yeah.
I spent countless hours on my Game Boy as a kid.
Right. Well, Yokoi was a master of what Epstein calls lateral thinking with withered technology.
Okay.
He didn't always rely on the newest tech.
Right.
Instead, he combined existing technology in incredibly innovative ways.
So he was all about resourcefulness and finding new uses for what was already there.
Exactly. He took existing technology and found new and unexpected applications for it. For example, the Game Boy's processor was actually a decade old, and its screen was grayscale and not very sharp.
Right.
But Yokoi's ingenious design and focus on gameplay made it a massive success.
That's such a great lesson. You don't always need to be on the bleeding edge to be innovative. Sometimes the best solutions come from reimagining what's already available.
Absolutely. And this lateral thinking often stems from having a wide range of experiences and interests, from being able to connect those dots between different areas of knowledge.
Okay, so we've talked about the sampling period, the difference between kind and wicked learning environments, and the power of analogical thinking. That's a lot to process.
Yeah.
What are some practical takeaways for our listeners? How can we actually apply these ideas to our own lives and careers?
One of Epstein's key messages is that it's perfectly fine to not have everything figured out early on.
Okay.
In fact, he suggests that embracing a zigzagging approach to career development, experimenting with different fields and roles before settling on a specialty, can be incredibly beneficial.
So it's okay to be a late bloomer.
More than okay. Epstein highlights a fascinating study from Harvard called the Dark Horse Project.
Okay.
Researchers studied people who felt deeply fulfilled in their careers and discovered that many of them didn't follow a linear path.
Oh, wow.
They often found their passion through trial and error, through exploring different fields and roles.
So they were searching for that sweet spot of match quality, as Epstein calls it, the perfect alignment of your skills, interests, and the work itself.
Precisely. And finding that match often involves experimentation, taking risks, and being open to changing course.
Right.
The participants in the Dark Horse Project actually cautioned against simply replicating their exact steps because everyone's path is unique.
That's reassuring. Because let's face it, not everyone knows exactly what they want to be when they grow up. And maybe that's perfectly fine.
It absolutely is. And even if you think you have it all figured out, the world is changing so rapidly that the skills you need today might not be the skills you need tomorrow.
So how do we stay ahead of the curve? How can we ensure that we're not just mastering skills that will be outdated in a few years?
Epstein emphasizes the importance of what he calls self-regulatory learning. It's not enough to just passively absorb information.
Yeah.
You need to be actively engaged in your own learning journey.
Self-regulatory learning. That sounds a bit like a buzzword. Could you break that down for me? What does that actually look like in practice?
It's about becoming the architect of your own development.
Okay.
It involves 3 key steps: reflect, plan, and evaluate.
Okay.
First, you reflect on your experiences, identify your strengths and weaknesses, and determine what you want to learn.
Okay.
Then you plan how you're going to acquire those skills, whether it's taking a class, finding a mentor, or starting a side project.
Right.
Finally, you evaluate your progress and adjust your plan as needed.
So it's about taking ownership of your own learning, not waiting for someone to tell you what to do.
Precisely. It's about being proactive, curious, and always seeking ways to improve.
Yeah.
This is a skill set that's becoming increasingly valuable in our rapidly changing world. Because if you can master the art of learning, you can adapt to any situation, pick up new skills quickly, and thrive in any environment.
I love that. It's incredibly empowering to think that we can all become lifelong learners, regardless of our background or where we are in life.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes Epstein's work so compelling.
Right.
He's not just challenging the conventional wisdom about specialization. He's offering a hopeful and optimistic perspective on what's possible for anyone who's willing to embrace a more expansive approach to learning and development.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, from the limitations of the 10,000-hour rule to the power of a sampling period, from kind versus wicked learning environments to the importance of analogical thinking and self-regulatory learning.
Right.
But before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on one more thing. Epstein's concept of match quality.
Okay.
The idea of finding the right fit between your skills, interests, and the work you do.
Yeah.
How did this tie into the idea of passion?
That's a fantastic question. And I
Yeah.
think it gets to the heart of what makes work meaningful and fulfilling.
Right.
Epstein argues that we often romanticize passion as if it's something we're born with and just need to discover.
Right.
But the reality is that passion often develops over time as we gain experience, build our skills, and discover work that aligns with our values and interests.
So it's less about finding your passion and more about cultivating it along the way.
Exactly. And that cultivation often involves stepping outside of your comfort zone, experimenting, taking risks, and embracing new possibilities.
I like that. It's about discovering work that challenges you, keeps you engaged, and
Yeah.
fuels your desire to learn and grow.
Precisely. It's a much more empowering way to think about passion than passively waiting for it to strike you like a bolt of lightning.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation.
Yeah.
I feel like I've learned so much, and I hope our listeners feel the same way.
Me too. And I think the most important takeaway here is that learning is a lifelong journey.
Yeah.
We all have the capacity to become more adaptable, resilient, and successful, regardless of where we're starting from.
You know, it's funny about that Dark Horse project you mentioned.
Yeah.
They were kind of hesitant to share their exact path.
Right.
Because they knew it wouldn't necessarily be the right fit for everyone else.
That's right. It's not about following a rigid formula.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the principles that underpin their success.
Exactly. It's about mastering the art of learning, adapting, and finding that perfect match quality for themselves.
And those skills, those are transferable to any field, any industry, any situation you can imagine.
That's what makes it so empowering.
It really is. And I think that message resonates particularly deeply in today's world, where so many people are grappling with anxiety about the future of work and the rapid pace of technological change.
Yeah. Instead of fearing the unknown, we can choose to see it as an opportunity for growth and self-discovery.
Precisely. The more we embrace learning how to learn, the more adaptable and resilient we become.
You know, there's one more thing I wanted to pick your brain about.
Okay.
Epstein talks about the importance of dropping your familiar tools,
Yeah.
of being willing to let go of what you know when a situation demands it.
That's such a crucial point, and it circles back beautifully to our earlier discussion about the Challenger disaster and the firefighters who tragically lost their lives with their tools still in hand.
It's a stark reminder that sometimes our expertise can become a liability if we're not willing to adapt.
Exactly. In a wicked learning environment where the rules are constantly changing, what worked yesterday might not cut it today.
Right. So how do we learn to drop our tools? How do we cultivate that flexibility and open-mindedness?
I think it starts with a healthy dose of humility.
Okay.
We need to be willing to admit when we don't have all the answers, when our existing knowledge and skills might not be enough.
It's about embracing uncertainty, being comfortable with not having all the answers.
Yes, and it's about being open to learning from others, from people who offer different perspectives and experiences.
It's about breaking down those silos of specialization and building bridges between diverse fields.
Absolutely, because the more we diversify our network of knowledge and experience, the more adaptable and resilient we become.
Wow, this has been an incredible deep dive.
It has.
We've explored the limitations of the 10,000-hour rule, the power of a sampling period, the difference between kind and wicked learning environments, and the importance of analogical thinking and self-regulatory learning.
Yeah.
And we've kind of delved into how these ideas can empower us to not only navigate the complexities of a rapidly changing world, but also to unlock our full potential and create a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
Absolutely.
I feel like I've gained so much from this conversation.
Me too.
And I hope our listeners have too.
Yeah, me too. And I think the most important takeaway is this.
Yeah.
Learning is a lifelong adventure, and each of us has the capacity to become more adaptable, resilient, and successful, regardless of our starting point.
Beautifully said. So to everyone listening, keep learning, keep growing, and keep exploring.
Yeah.
The world is your oyster.
Absolutely.
And never forget,
Yeah.
the most valuable skill you can develop is the ability to learn how to learn.
That's it.
That's what will truly set you apart in our ever-changing world. Those are fantastic words to end on. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the fascinating world of specialization and range.
It is my pleasure.
And to our listeners out there, stay curious, and we'll catch you next time for another thought-provoking exploration of ideas that matter.